Well, we'll give it a 30-second. Actually like a good intro song. Kind of
Yep.
pumps me up. Well, this is kind of a first, at least in this capacity. We've done a few podcasty things.
Yep.
But just you and I under the Curiosity Collective banner. No show has ever been recorded with this sort of new nebulous logo that represents some mysterious mission that in some ways I think we might share. So at least one tenet of it, which is how do we solve fatherlessness?
Yeah.
So for those that are watching this after the fact or tuning in live, if you're on my Facebook, you already know my name's Tim Rist. This is my father, John Rist. Dad, thanks for getting on the podcast with me.
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
And I'll try not to do something stupid like this, but I can't
try not to
guarantee it.
embarrass me,
Yeah,
Dad,
but I
please.
can't guarantee it.
Please don't embarrass me in front of my friends, okay? Because we are literally live right now, so anyone could be watching this, and there's no way to take back anything you say. So
yeah, I can't guarantee anything
so
in that regard.
I had an interesting experience just a week ago, which I guess would be a trial into this, where we were at the Boys and Girls Club.
Yep.
And we were having a conversation with kids about real estate, and we were two generations of real estate professionals, and Maisie was there. And you know, I've been doing a lot of content interviewing local leaders and business professionals about their stories, but something came up from that interview with one of the kids at the Boys and Girls Club about what do you do with burnout and how do you keep your why preserved in such a challenging industry? And it got me thinking about, one, when I do too much business and not enough actually connecting with what really matters to me, which is solving real problems in society. You know, homelessness is important, but I think like the key issue that our world is facing right now, I think, is fatherlessness. And I think that there's so many people out there that are alone, that are isolated, that are disillusioned in their faith journeys, that are coming from broken families, or maybe they have great families. And like me and my story I shared with Michael earlier, they created their own isolation. They banished themselves to fatherlessness. So I guess for the sake of our conversation today, this is under the guise of the Curiosity Collective, where really we just want to ask great questions and tell great stories.
Okay.
But I wanted to start with getting your feedback on, you know, kind of my own fatherlessness journey that I shared about pretty openly with Michael for what you were able to get to, because I know it's long.
Yeah.
Did you have any thoughts on that episode that just went live?
Well, you're kind of catching me a little bit off guard there because I had a lot of thoughts about it. Can you ask a better question?
Sure. Yeah. In the note of asking better questions.
More specific. No offense.
You've been an amazing father to me my whole life.
Which is a little bit of a surprise to me sometimes, but that's great to hear.
You've been an amazing dad.
Okay, thank you.
And
just so you know, from the father's perspective, which you may also experience being a father now, that you're very aware of how you're not an amazing father while you're trying your best to be an amazing father many times. Anyway.
Well, I wasn't very easy on you.
No comment. We'll wait that for another time when we have other siblings present.
Yeah, sure.
We'll do votes.
Okay. Who was the hardest? Well, I know I wasn't, because I was so hard on myself. I mean, I was so hard on myself. I was so hard on everybody around me.
Think about what you just said, which goes back to the whole thing. I agree that in a way, the single number one problem in the universe is fatherlessness.
Yeah.
But we'll get more into that later. And so if you're hard on yourself, you project that everywhere else.
Yeah. Well, I imagine this is not a usual context for a conversation of a podcast studio as a father and son, critiquing and evaluating our own fatherhood journeys and our own fatherlessness journeys.
Absolutely.
But I had my own fatherlessness journey, not necessarily by proxy of your amazingness as a dad. And I think there's probably a lot of dads that should hear that today, that my fatherlessness was a product of my own heart issues and my own response to the pressures of being one of 8, in the middle of 8 kids, growing up out in the country. Like, the truth is I had 2 parents who were amazingly involved in my life. There's some trauma in that involvement, but it wasn't that I didn't have a dad, and you didn't have a dad really, because he died when you were how old?
14.
14. So, and you'll get into that story in a moment, but I think that before we get into the fatherlessness by proxy of having a dad who died when you were 14, if we're talking about this problem of what happens when you find yourself without the relationship you want to have with your dad,
and in fact need to have,
and yet you need to have, what do you do? Do you adopt a dad? Do you go rent a dad?
Take drugs?
Do you take drugs?
Or other sundry things which we won't go into?
Yeah, well, you medicate. Do you medicate the pain and the void, right? And try to numb it out.
Yep.
I mean, there's any number of options, and frankly, I've done kind of a little bit of everything at trying to handle the fatherlessness whole. But I think it is to your credit that you really exemplified the heart of the father in my life. And so if there's only one thing I accomplished today in sharing a little bit of a part 2 of my own story, the part that's unfolding today, is that I am emotional. I am so eternally thankful that I have had the honor of having you as my dad. And not just today, but that you have showed up my whole entire life as best as you knew how to be that loving father to me. And that you have had the humility the entire time I've known you. You've had the continually displayed humility to know that the best thing you were ever going to do is be a baton pass. And my faith, the richness of faith that I have today, has you to thank in large part for exemplifying what it looks like to be a humble servant and what it looks like to love in a very long suffering way. And so thank you for that. And if just what I've seen, and especially the recent chapter in your life, that there's a lot of people out there that have that fatherless ache. And I've seen you show up time and time again for so many people to be an extension of the hands and feet of the Father to an entire generation of young men and older men too. And
so at this point, you can drop the mic and we can end the podcast, because that's pretty heavy duty. I'm kind of blown away, but because that's probably way up really high in anybody's wish list, is that they would have a child at some point that would not just say stuff like that, but would actually believe that. And so I didn't always necessarily think that would happen. In fact, there were many, many years where what all I could see was that none of my kids really would have seen me as that way. And yet my goal with having kids was what you just said, and particularly, sorry.
No need to apologize. Well, I think for
passing the baton.
Yeah.
Because that's the most important thing that I ever got, was the baton of an encounter with Heavenly Father that changed everything, like really in a moment. And all I could think about, and sorry, in a way, my life is really one dimensional in a sense. It's like all, honestly, this might sound exaggeration or dramatic, but if I had to reduce it down, the whole story, you can either believe it or not, but it's just rebounding from one instant of encountering the eternal Father and the perfect love of God that was so perfect that it actually blew away in an instant all the fears that had dominated my entire existence up until that point. And we're talking fears enough that are like a pre-taste of hell type fear, terror and hopelessness, and have that all like vaporize in a moment. Like, you think, like, this is too good to be true, and it's not. It was true, and I knew it was true, and it happened when I was 19.
So I want to unpack the story from, if you're whatever you're willing to share, from 13 to 19, because I think between 12 or 13, my defining moment in my life, for context, and I think that's part of the miracle of this moment, is that at my defining moment was at 12 years old, putting a gun in my mouth and pulling the trigger.
Yeah, that's,
In that moment, I was blinded by my own darkness.
yeah.
I was lost.
Yep.
I had prayed a sinner's prayer.
Yep.
I had had a encounter with God, and I shared about this a little bit more, but I think that the backstory is really important, because that for me, like, despite having a conversion moment,
Yeah.
right, I became unafraid to die because I knew I had some faith that I was going to go to heaven, but I still was afraid to live. I was afraid to live, and I was afraid that my presence on this earth was not a net positive.
Yeah.
I became
Which
convinced,
was a heavy duty lie.
but there was a lot of data for it, because I was a troublemaker. I wasn't an easy son for you.
Because that's the worst lie, is the one that have a lot of data with them.
Yeah, a little mixture.
And that's why the liar is so powerful, because he's smarter than any of us. And if we anyway, not to get too far off that.
I think it's I think it's a I think it's a valuable sidestep just to the conversation to say both of us had early introductions to really deep core lies that ultimately rooted in fatherlessness.
Yeah.
That I was alone. I isolated myself
Yeah.
in the middle of a big family.
Yep.
And in that time, I wouldn't have been able to identify a good father. Yeah. Because I was lost in my own programs.
Absolutely.
Right. And I was really critical. It was really critical of everything. And that criticalness was just kind of a misplaced version of my own gifting. But that's my backstory. I want to go into yours. What happened for you at 12 and then 13 and then 14? What was your journey with fatherlessness?
I'll try to do it succinctly. And I'll touch on some things that aren't normally touched upon, because I really think nowadays more than ever, it's really helpful to hear real stories about them. So there was inappropriate relationship with my mom early on, even in the realm of physical contact, that I found out about later. And simultaneously, there was a lack of normal connection with my father. No remembrances of him in any way ever saying even I love you, let alone affection or anything like that. And there was also an older brother that had an anger issue that bullied me. So I, like many, many people, had an attack on, I was very insecure. And on top of it, I know now there was a spiritual attack. One that I can identify, and I won't go into a lot of detail about it, but other than to just say it came suddenly, it was very clear. It was when I was 6 years old, out of the blue, just a little kid, and I suddenly get hit with a very strong, very uncomfortable sort of feeling of what I can identify now as unwanted same-sex attraction. And because that was so, with it came a great fear and a great immediate shutting me down of knowing what to do with that. And then it actually ended up becoming the basis for me being unknown, nobody knowing me, and afraid that if anybody really did know me, they would hate me too, as much as I hated myself. That extended all the way until I actually encountered that at 19, that unconditional love of my ultimate father, our ultimate father.
Yeah, the creator.
The creator.
You had an encounter with the creator of your existence when you were 19 years old. Now,
So
I think that there's an important moment though of like at 14, if you're willing to unpack. I mean, I've heard the story a few times and I know you've shared it, but like you went from having a dad who was distant and you were dealing with shame and you were dealing with your own identity crisis.
Yeah.
But then you had a dad who went from being distant to no longer there. What happened?
Well, so I'm 14 years old and I'm hiding behind an image of a hippie, long hair with the hippies at high school, because that's what you did, is you find a group where you have an identity that hides. In my case, probably my biggest fear was afraid that anybody would know about my insecurities. And so I tried to look like a cool hippie. And I was very closed emotionally. And I had an older brother and an older sister. Well, one night in January 14th in 1969, I awoke to the sound of cries in the next room. I had just fallen asleep. So I walked down the hall and I go into my parents' bedroom, and my dad's laying in the bed, and my mother is crying, and my sister's trying to get on the phone, and my dad is having a heart attack in the bed, and they're freaking out. And I'm 14. And I walk into my room, and my mother says, "Here, do CPR on him," whatever that is. So I literally, because she's completely freaked out, I go and put my mouth on my dad's mouth and just start blowing air. Like I didn't know what CPR was at all. And he was doing what they call, not to get too, you want to hear it, it's called a death gurgle. It sounds like this when someone's dying and they're having a heart attack. And he was doing that. And here I'm just like trying to blow air in his mouth and my sister's trying to call the ambulance. And so I do that a few times. And so then they get somebody on the phone. And so I stopped trying to do that. And fairly quickly they got there, and I already just kind of knew somehow deep down inside that he was dying and that he was going to die. I just inherently knew. But anyway, they come and they in the ambulance, and so they leave. My brother and my mother leave in the ambulance, and they're taking him, to try to resuscitate. But I had noticed before they did it, they put stuff on him, and I had passed by the room and I saw one of the guys shaking his head no. So when they leave, I go out with my sister, and she says this. She goes, "We should pray." And it's kind of sad because it brings up something that you also touched on, and that there's a lot of religion in the world, and a lot of people, when they get in moments like this where they out of fear and like nothing else to do, like, well, I guess we can pray, but there's no relationship there. There's no like real faith. So we said like the Catholic prayers, like they're, and because that was all we knew what to do. But it was like there was no power in it. It was
Mm.
like, okay, I guess we said the prayer.
Mm.
And it's such a pathetic representation of true Christianity, but that's all that we knew. So a little bit later, maybe 45 minutes, a car pulls up and my mom gets out of the car and my brother, and all I can see is by her posture, her just barely even getting out of the car and walking in with a slump. And you basically can just see on her whole persona what she then became for the next 6 months to a year. And was that she died too emotionally.
Hmm.
And so what I experienced, I realized very quickly, it was like both parents died.
Hmm.
And she was just like not there. She
Hmm.
was emotionally withdrawn. And I had a knot in my stomach. And that's what used to happen to me, even when I was littler and had terrible dreams. Just a knot in my stomach, didn't know why. And it would just stay there. And so I'd just carry that around for a long time. And there was no solution because there was no one that could come and give me help for what I was going through as a 14-year-old.
Hmm.
So anyway, I don't know if that's really helpful to share.
Well,
I
think it's really important to share on one that is horrific. It's a horrific coming of age moment. Being a teenager is already hard enough. I mean, I can't imagine how much more I was set up for in life by not losing you at 14. And so I think that for someone who's watching this, who's dealing with whatever their version of fatherlessness might be, on the spectrum of you never met your dad, or you did and he wasn't there for you, or you did and he wasn't there for you and then he exited the stage abruptly or
worse,
dramatically.
he was abusive to you.
Yeah, or he was not he was an anti-father.
Yeah.
Right? He
Which actually my dad didn't mean to, but he was, I
Yeah.
realize. And some fathers, it's very subtle. They don't even realize they're doing it because, like you said earlier, you did bad things because you projected it onto others.
Mhm.
And so that's what everybody does.
Yeah.
And so I realize now that my dad, I've really like forgiven him and stuff like that. Now I have the attitude that there was a lot of good things and he did the best he could, but he didn't know what he was doing in the situation.
Yeah.
And that's because behind all of this, there thing that we haven't explicitly mentioned that's critical in my whole worldview and everything is that there is the eternal Father, perfect Father, and there is an eternal enemy that is a perfect enemy, if you will, and that he's totally evil, and he is the source of all evil.
Yeah.
And many of the things you said earlier, they didn't originate with you.
Yeah.
Suicide, despair, it originates with the author of all of that. And that's what everybody's dealing with.
Yeah. Was it Isaac Newton who said for every action there's an opposite and equal reaction?
Yet in this case, the opposite is not equal. He's infinitely weaker and infinitely dumber than God.
Yeah.
But he's much stronger and smarter than any human entity. And that's well visible as we see the world and how much evil there is in it.
I think that part of the crisis of fatherlessness is it is this tale of two truths. And on one side of the spectrum, we have the reality that there's no earthly parent, even on the best end of the spectrum, the parent that does their very best and tries everything possibly to set their child up for success and to love them. And there's a lot of amazing parents out there.
Yeah.
Even that child can feed the wolf of despair until that wolf wins.
That's right.
And at the same time, the child who's completely abandoned and who never even grows up with any concept of a parent
That's right.
can grow up to be the most profoundly loved and loving person.
Absolutely.
And then we know a few of those too. And so it
Yeah.
is interesting, as our friend Russ would say, life happens and then you choose. Your experience in life is your context plus your perspective. So you had a really tough context right out of the gates.
Yeah.
And it was almost like losing two parents.
Yeah.
And your perspective on that, whatever the experience was that you had this knot in your stomach, and the perspective that you had was that you were alone. And your experience in life, what happened after that? Like how did your context plus your perspective manifest from 15?
Escape. So
Yeah.
drugs, alcohol, and then Eastern religion of all thing, because I happen to be someone that had a real somehow connection with God at a very early age, and then the enemy of God came in and tried to screw that up, and so there was one event that happened. Well, and that was when I was in college at 19, and I was on LSD, and I had what you would call a bad trip. And in that bad trip, I had more of an unveiled encounter with my deepest fears when you're like on LSD and it's raw in that you're encountering it in a pure form. It was so traumatic that for I think about 6 months afterwards, normally when you come off a bad trip or you wake up the next morning and oh good, it's over. Well, when I woke up the next morning, the paranoia was still there, very freaky, and it like lasts for like 6 months. And so that drove me into another version of escape, which was Eastern religion. And that was, like the Bible says, Satan coming as an angel of light. I got very, very involved in a substitute of what is Christianity, where you deal with prayer and even Lord, having a guru as a Lord, and all these things that are almost like you sound like Christian words, but they're like with a substitute for it. And yet it was all an imitation. And then finally, another whole story is there came a time when God, like he's doing in many people we know, began to intervene and know that the time was right for me to have that amazing experience where you actually, get to the end of your rope and you're that serious and you're that desperate and you're that hungry that you go, okay, God, and this is literally the prayer. Okay, God, I'll give it all up to you. That was my prayer. And man, I meant it and everything changed.
Amazing. Just for the sake of our viewers' ears, I hope the tapping isn't scaring any of our live watchers away. I'm curious what comments we have coming in. I'll check in with Michael in a moment. But I'm sure that that story is worth sharing now of that turning point for you. And I think just to reflect on what you just shared, the process of numbing and searching took you down roads that only created compounding pain.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a range of experiences that people can have on psychedelics, and then there's psychedelics, and then there's plant medicines, and there's lots of different categories of experiences.
Yeah.
Recently, I shared some really vulnerable ones for me.
Yeah.
But as you're sharing that, like I think it is worth putting out there as a disclaimer for anyone that is pursuing truth. I'm not one to say not to turn over every stone, but I think it is an important disclaimer to note that, man, especially with psychedelics and specifically, not knowing how much you're doing and what setting you're doing. I mean, the reality of real damage is possible, and it can sit with you for a long time. So I think that's a worthy disclaimer. Obviously, we have here in Corvallis, we have a local psilocybin services center that's monitored through the OHA, and the testimonies of people coming out and having these God encounters are really profound and abundant. And yet, I do think that there's a discrepancy between a plant and those like acid is um, it is so powerful. It is so powerful, and I think that the ability for any of those things to make the veil thinner and to become grotesquely aware of how real hell is, and maybe even see a window into heaven, but to depending on the context that you're in, to get stuck in one or the other of those realities. I mean, that's a real thing.
Yeah, I know a lot of stories too about God's coming to people on even LSD. He can come to anybody, anywhere, at any time.
Yeah.
And that he can speak through a donkey, right?
Yeah.
So he can speak through any means, and he knows where each person is. And he's incredibly one-on-one and persistent, like you said, even in your podcast. The part I did read here that was really great is where you said that it's that you are somebody who not so much is that you're pursuing anything, but that you're being pursued.
Mhm.
And that I really think is much more accurate, that God is pursuing all of his creatures, and he is the greatest unrequited lover in the universe.
Yeah. Amen to that.
And he's waiting for us to say, will you marry me? And
Yeah.
but that can't be forced on anybody.
So what happened at 19?
So 19, I wish I could say, suddenly everything became perfect, which is a wrong idea. A lot of people, it's promoted like, oh, accept Jesus and everything will become wonderful. Well, certain things become wonderful. Like you've suddenly gained the first time in your life this clarity over this, hellish demonic fear that you're free from. But there's a difference between encountering Christ and then being reprogrammed in your thoughts and your emotions that have been set in there from when you were birthed that are based on a bunch of lies.
Yeah.
And so that's what the Bible calls sanctification, and that's a lifelong process. I haven't met anybody perfect yet, though some of them want to claim to be. And those are scary people.
Wait, you mean the church isn't filled with perfect Christians? And you mean I'm not totally safe to go into church and assume that I'm going to have like a perfectly good experience because it's filled with Jesus lovers?
Yeah, right. Which brings up a part about the father thing that I've experienced even more recently, is that I've had different father figures in my life, since I accepted Christ, that are human. And those are valid because God wants to communicate himself, not just through a burning bush or on a psilocybin trip or on whatever, but also, if you think about it, what he can show himself through rocks and trees and the mountains. But a human being made in his image aren't they even set up to show him even in a more full way, the personality, the eyes, the face, the touch, the full nature of God, his kindness, his personality. And so God, I believe, has called us to be like his hands and feet and eyes and everything. And what the mistake I made a lot in my life was I would say, well, it's just me and God and we'll do it. And I don't want to share some of these things. And God was saying, well, John, what if I want to touch you through another human being? And yes, you got hurt by a human being, but now I want to bring healing to those hurts through another human being. Would you trust me enough to do that? So that took many, many years to realize that I needed to trust God in that way. And that's a more recent part of my story where I've found such healing, particularly in the last 10 years. That's really changed me a lot, where I took my faith to another level in my relationship with the Father by allowing him to show me himself through other men and women of God, and sometimes not even men of God, or just other men, where he would actually show me his love as a father figure through a human being. And that brought healing to that void that was a legitimate need that we all have. It wasn't like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you just, toughen up? No, we all have the need to be cherished, to be loved, to be doted upon, to be kissed, hugged, affectionate with a father given by God, to truly be loved like that. And I'm experiencing that more than ever. And you know what's crazy then? I can give that away.
Yeah.
And so now I find myself, helping other men from teenagers to even men older than me, and I'm 71, who are actually still stuck back there, wherever they stopped growing, wherever they stopped trusting to be loved, and it creates all sorts of problems. It never goes away. No matter how hard you bury it.
Fatherlessness is a bottomless pit.
Yeah. Well, it's an inherent need, right? So you're created to have a father, and and I can't even. Yeah, I don't even want to begin to say I know all that ramifications, but I can tell you this: that it's really awesome to experience fatherhood all through your life, that it grows, because our ultimate Father is this eternal Father who's perfect and has unlimited love, and it's such a powerful force that it causes you to overcome all the other stuff, and particularly fear. Because I know, that's one of the big things in life. We can talk about fear, we can talk about fatherless, we can talk about drugs and fentanyl, and fear is truly the root of many suicides, mental illness, and even terrible crimes, people driven by fear. And at the root of that fear is a great root of evil. And the cure for that fear is the Father himself. He is the only one. His power is the only force in the universe that is stronger than the greatest fear. I know that because I experienced that, and that's been a cornerstone of my life. Because up to that point, I was resigned to. I knew that the fear was the most powerful force I had ever encountered, because it had been. But this love of God through Jesus Christ, man, when I discovered that it was stronger, it was like, whoa, and so ever since then, my primary thrill motive is just to share that with other people. And so that's what I do now full time.
Well, that's why they call it the good news.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That the kingdom of heaven is at hand, that the father-son, father-daughter relationship is there for the taking for anybody that would choose to believe it. And that you don't actually need the sacrifices, the indulgences, the church membership, the religious affiliation, the whatever, insert broker for said experience. Jesus was the ultimate anti-broker.
Yeah, no mediator between God and man except the man Christ Jesus.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I want to do a little, just for funsies, do a little call to action if someone finds themselves, wanting to explore what could fatherhood and adoption, spiritual adoption, look like for you right now. I mean, the opportunity is available to anyone at any time. So if someone finds themselves listening to this after the fact and saying, man, I really sense I've got a wound here that's bleeding out. Maybe it's bleeding under a coat of armor that I've skillfully built over my whole life to try to mend and to hold and to mask this fatherless hole.
And that armor is so deep, it will scare the crap out of you, how deeply you've buried it.
Yeah.
It's so deep.
I'm still unpacking it. Let's be real.
Yeah. Well, I am too.
Yeah. But there is a path towards healing and not towards more armoring, right? There is a path towards journeying through the heart opening vulnerability of adding sequential healing and not adding more pain and then perpetuating that pain. Hurt people, hurt other people, healed people, heal other people.
So
you're a healer, right?
Is what church is supposed to be.
Yeah.
To quote my good friend Bob Lund, if I may, he wrote a book that way.
The way our church ought to be. Shout out to Bob Lund.
Yeah, the way it ought to be, which actually has a lot of really good stuff in it.
Yeah.
And many people this day are actually saying, well, I don't go to church because it ain't what it ought to be. And I'm going, yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But what I find myself enjoying these days is being part of the solution rather than just sitting back in the armchair, being a quarterback armchair quarterback going, oh, look at how terrible all those hypocrites. And that's exciting to be able to be part of the church being what it's supposed to be, which is people experiencing unconditional love, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not constant, through another human being.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the Bible talks about that you can confess your sins one to another and be healed. So I experience that in my life on a regular basis with actual some human beings, not just God. And I've had to learn to step out in that because we got hurt by opening up. We got hurt by opening up to people and saying some of the biggest, scariest things. And then they do the worst thing. You imagine what's the worst possible thing that could happen? Well, they could turn around and hate you and despise you and, post it all over the, internet or something. Well, I haven't had the post on the internet part, but I've had the other part. And so that obvious solution to that is, well, I'm never going to do that again. And the devil goes, perfect.
So do you have any advice for me on the vulnerability hangover I'm dealing with right now? Because Michael Avery pulled this 2-hour-long story out of me like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, the vulnerability
hangover, right? The Brene Brown talks about after her world-renowned TED talk of spilling the beans.
Whoops.
Wakes up saying, "What have I done?" Yeah.
Well,
employees.
I used to have those on a regular basis in high school. Here's how it happened: you get drunk, and then you just spill all of this stuff because that's all the emotion. And then you wake up the next morning and you feel like, oh my gosh,
a double hangover.
Yeah. And what happens was when you get drunk, you finally just let out all these things that you're feeling and thinking all the time. And it feels so good. And you're telling, it could even be like a stranger. It's so pathetic. And you're telling them, oh, no, this and that. And you're drunk.
Isn't that amazing? I just want to observe something because alcohol is such a prolific force in our society right now. And yet, if we talked about fatherlessness being kind of the linchpin of all of these issues, because fatherlessness creates fear. Fatherlessness creates the void of pain that is resulting in all these fentanyl addictions and these fentanyl overdoses. But also on a low grade, that fatherlessness creates that numbing and that isolation and that lack of vulnerability that then requires alcohol to unlock. And so because you crave connection, you crave alcohol to have the courage to drop the mask so you can have that connection that you're deserving of. And so it's interesting how everything's linked together. The problem's clear. You talk to a law enforcement officer, you ask them, what's the biggest issue? And they might say fentanyl, but the precursor is really the pain that caused the addiction. And the source of the pain is fatherlessness. So we should get to the solution. You talked about, there was a moment you had at 19. There's a journey that I've been on to not just to walk into spiritual adoption, but to become aware of the far-reaching effects of it, to continue on that journey. Just real quick, before we close it out with some perspectives on maybe a solution someone could take action on today if they find themselves dealing with the pain of fatherlessness, we got to give Michael Avery a little love from backstage. He's been sitting over there. Michael, how's it going, man?
Fantastic. This is an incredible conversation, and it's a synchronicity in my life. I can relate to so many things you guys are talking about.
Cool.
What's that, Tim?
What's happening for you over there?
Oh, you mean in my life?
Yeah, or just, you're hearing this conversation about fatherlessness. Any observations?
I'm living my life. I'm going through my past. I'm seeing that little boy who had a great father who came out of the 70s Jesus movement and went into cults, and everything got taken out of his control, and he showed up the best that he could. But honestly, probably the best gift he gave me was not trying to father me, not trying to control me, but letting me go and trusting that, whatever your belief system is, but that I'm going to be taken care of, that I'm going to be all right. And I'm just coming to that place now. I had to go through a lot of the struggles of, what are the symptoms of fatherlessness? Even recognizing that in yourself, in myself. And then you guys are talking about God. And I don't sit in the same seat that you do as far as your world perspective, but everything that you're saying rings true, because there is something bigger. There is something underlying all of this that is love. And it doesn't matter how fantastic your parents are. You can, if you are not experiencing that love, if you are afraid to show yourself and to be seen, there's not enough love coming from the physical world that can ever fill the hole of the love that undergirds everything, that wants to fill me. And as I get closer and closer to it and open up to it, just realizing how much love there is, it's infinite.
It is infinite.
Amen
Yeah.
to that, dude. That's
Nice.
great observations. Thanks for sharing that. So, we're almost at getting to the top of the hour, and I told you we keep it between 30 minutes and an hour. So I want to honor that commitment, but I do want to just give you a chance to share from your heart for anybody out there that finds themselves observing these potential symptoms of fatherlessness manifesting as a chronic need to medicate in any way, shape, or form. The symptoms of fatherlessness to be a knot in the stomach, a fear of this, of the antithesis of what Michael just shared, like this sense that I'm alone, that no one's got my back. If it's to be, it's up to me. There's nothing undergirding me. There's no safety net. If I don't show up, and I know a lot of great, incredible men. So I'm talking to you, whoever's hearing this, that incredible man who's so self-reliant, who has showed up in the most impossible circumstances, even on their own strength, and delivered safety and security for other people. I'm thinking about some of our veterans who've served overseas and faced unimaginable trauma and kept pushing forward and kept showing up. I'm thinking about many of the kids that we used to go to church with that had mostly present parents, but still found themselves isolated, and now find themselves more alone than they've ever been, still surrounded by people, desperately wanting to have connection, to have authentic, relationship with God. Maybe they've been injured by church, which is pretty common. Let's be real. Or they've been injured by a counterfeit of fatherhood.
Yeah, counterfeit.
Right.
Okay. So, you ready?
All right. We're taking the stage, Michael. Thanks for sharing your insights, brother.
All right. So, you ready for me to answer that?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. So I'll answer that question with a short story that happened last night. And last night I was over at a elderly friend's house, and while we were there, another elderly friend of his called and said, "Hey, I need a ride to the to the emergency room because I got a problem and my normal ride's not here." Well, my friend, he couldn't drive because he's got a leg problem, and I was about ready to leave, but the thought struck me, well, I could probably give him a ride. So I said, "Hey, I'll give him a ride if you want." So they talked. Bottom line is, they said, "Okay." So I drove over to this guy I'd never met's house. Well, he lived in a nursing home type thing. And I picked him up, and he was a Marine veteran. He's like 87 years old, and he was in his walker waiting. And so I get him in the car, and he was just a real down to earth kind of guy, not a lot of words. And we did some little chit chatting on our way over to the emergency room, and I took him inside, and it turned out that, I was just trying to be accommodating. And I noticed that, he was just real. He was genuine, but he was in some pain, and we didn't talk a lot. It was real. And it ended up, we had to wait a little bit. So we're sitting there, and I suddenly kind of realized, well, I need to ask this guy about a spiritual question. So I had no idea. And I said, "Bob, is there, sometimes I pray for people because it helps, do you think is there anything I could pray for you about?" And right away he goes, "Oh, I've really been worried about that lately for some reason." "I worried about what?" And he just all of a sudden says, "Well, I know I'm a sinner. I know I'm a sinner." He's just suddenly volunteering this. And it turns out, he says, "This has really been bothering me lately." And as I listened, I realized here's an 87-year-old guy who's been, Marine in the war, been through all sorts of stuff, got married, had a wife, then all this stuff. And one thing that he was really true about was the truth. And the truth was, I'm not perfect. I'm a sinner. What was so crazy, though, is I said, "Well," I go, "do you know if you're okay with God, if you're going to heaven?" And he goes, "No, he goes, "It bothers me." And I thought, sure, everybody in America by now would have heard about Jesus and all this stuff. And it turns out that he had half of the gospel, half of the good news. And I said, Bob, there was a time when I actually felt the same way. I was afraid. I knew that there was I had problems. I knew there was a terror. I knew there was an unresolved problem. And I'd gone to church too, and I'd heard all that stuff, and it was like powerless. But then I encountered that there was a way that I could experience for sure the solution to my sin, and such that I know for sure I'm going to heaven. Can I share that with you? And he's like, well, yeah. And so I shared the very simple thing that who was Jesus Christ? He was the eternal Son of God who somehow becomes a man, and not just to be a good teacher, but to come and die in our place, the death penalty. And in doing so, literally takes the full brunt of all of our shame, all of our sins, all of the stuff we could feel afraid and guilty and shameful for, on himself, full on paying the full price, dying, and then rising from the dead and saying, look, I have fully taken the brunt of all the stuff you could ever be ashamed or afraid of or be judged for or condemned. And I just want to give you now the gift of freedom to go and say all of your sins are totally washed away, obliterated, if you'll just receive the gift, which is to receive me into your heart, that you would no longer be alone, that you would have me in your life as God, as Savior, because you need it. And that's can be done by faith anytime. I just told this to Bob, and it was like he was like a child, because he had like his eyes open and he was like hearing it. And I said, you can do it anytime, Bob. You can do it later. You could even do it right now. And then he kind of said, well, no, I don't think I can do it, because, it makes sense. And I told him this truth, which is also heavy duty. I go, no, it's not a matter if you can do it, Bob. It's a matter if you will do it, because faith comes as a gift too, even with the message. And it was like a new revelation to him. And it's also to anybody hearing that faith to receive Christ comes with hearing the message. I've had many people say, well, I can see it's real for you, and that's great, but I that's just not real for me. I just can't do it. And I say, well, actually, it's not a matter if you can, it's a matter if you will, because it says if you will hear the message, and that you can choose to believe it or not. And and I knew he was going to think about it. I didn't try to close the sale, and I just let him think about it. But I knew it was a life-changing moment here to an 88-year-old man. I felt so privileged to be able to, kind of dive in and something like that. But yet everybody out there who doesn't know Christ can have that happen at any time if you hear it, So that's what I would say.
So yeah, you're like a spiritual paratrooper.
Yeah, right.
For
Or what
someone
do they
at
call
88.
it? You dive into the direct message, spiritual direct message.
Yeah. And
DM.
and it was an 88-year-old man experiencing fatherlessness.
Yes.
And the symptoms that come with that, which is crippling fear
And isolation.
and
cover up. And you're all alone. Who can you tell about that? And here somebody doesn't come and comes to you. Like you said earlier, God came to Bob. Bob didn't come to God. And God came to you and to me. And he's coming to everybody, knocking.
I know that for those who are listening to this, there might be the questions of, well, what about motherlessness, and what about the mother heart of God, and what about the maternal needs on our planet? And this conversation is not to discount the holes that happen on that side of the heart, but it is to honor the irreplaceable role of the father heart in each person. And I think what I'm inspired of by you every day, truly, Dad, and what I feel part of the reason why I felt like I needed to just pause from business podcasts this afternoon, even though Michael and I had plenty of things that we could have talked about and plenty of business leaders that were ready to jump on our show. events coming up that we need to advertise, and real estate deals that I need to get back to, and counteroffers that need to be sent, yada, yada. I mean, it's never ending, right? Is that this platform matters. And so I hope that if you're watching this, you feel encouraged to engage with the need in your heart to be fathered, and for those mighty fathers that exist all over to be reminded of the incredible need for men to stand up and to step in and stand in the gap for this chasm of voids that exists, not to fill the hole, but to point the direction, to give kids and parents stuck in kids' bodies, or kids stuck in parents' bodies, a baton pass chance, like you did with Bob, right? You're not going to fill the void for him,
No.
but you showed up and you had courage and you shared your story and you gave a baton pass moment. You created a way by being a conduit of love, by being the hands and feet, just like what Jesus did. He showed up as love in flesh, so that we could get an example. And then he called us all to do the same exact thing. I want to just close with my perspective on this good news, because I've heard the gospel and preached the gospel my whole life in different forms, in different perversions, dare I say.
Yeah.
Right. I love to say it's just different iterations, but it's all a moving target of pursuing infinite love.
Yeah.
And yet the infinitely just God makes themselves so justly available to the child, to the childlike mind.
Yeah.
And I might be at 0.000002% revelation, and you like just poked into 0.0003,
Yeah. Somewhere.
of what there is to know in the
Right.
infinite pursuit of love.
Right.
But I just want to say, I'm really honored to be on this journey with you.
You too.
I'm thankful that for the few people that have stuck around for 56 minutes to be in the conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for being a part of the journey. I would like to share just an encouragement to the disillusioned, hurting post-Christian out there. I know you. I am you. I know what it's like to lay it all out on the line, thinking that if you do all the right things and check all the right boxes, you'll have a great life. You do the Christian thing. And I know what it feels like when it all comes crumbling down. And despite your best intentions, despite feeling like you were following all the rules and doing everything right, that everything went wrong. And maybe you're sitting here responding with an allergic reaction to all things Christ and Christianity because of an unjust perversion that you experienced. Yeah. I know that was me for a long time.
Sure. Very understandable.
And
very common.
Yeah, it's so common. God, it's amazing how, and yet at the same time, how many people right now in this moment in history are turning back to the foundation of the story, and yet arriving at a totally new place in intimacy with God that they've never experienced before in their life. Yeah. So whether you've been there, done that, you think you've tried the Christian thing, or maybe you're like, gosh, I was never able to really fully unsubscribe from the magic of Christ, if I'm honest. Even in my most agnostic moments, I would still have qualified myself as a Christ-leaning spiritualist because, I couldn't sidestep the fact that 2,000 years later, we're still talking about this guy all over the world.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of like the data is very compelling.
Right.
That between ages 30 and 33.
Yeah, that all time is BC and AD.
Yeah, I mean, it's like kind of a big deal. Like the story demands a response. It's the greatest story ever told, right? To think about that there could be the magic. Like, what if we actually had the keys to how Satan was going to show up all along, because he used Bible verses to tempt Jesus. We always knew that his playbook was to take the truth and to mix in a little bit of dirt to try to kill you. Exactly. He put that playbook on display. And what if all of the inquisitions and all of the crusades and all these heinous acts of genocide and racism and bigotry were not actually the expression of Christian faith or the heart of God,
Right.
They were the predictable prostitutions that we knew were coming all along.
Yeah.
They were the prostitutions of religious aspiration that resulted in the Jews murdering Jesus. And so for you who have experienced the perversion of faith, one, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. It's trauma. It's called spiritual abuse.
It sucks, and it shouldn't have happened. It was wrong, and it happened on our watch.
And it happened in Jesus' time. That was the Pharisees. It says that they put loads on men's shoulders and don't even lift a finger to help them. And they make them twice as much a son of hell as themselves. That's still going on today. And they were the ones that said were the representatives of God on earth.
And yet in all of that, it doesn't actually change the reality of a big T truth that is holding all your atoms together right now. There's a force that when scientists discovered it, they didn't know what to call it, but it's the thing that holds all the atoms together. And so I learned this from you, actually.
The Colossians.
The Colossians force. In him all things are held together, and in him all things consist. And so our best guess at how our atoms are even held together is this idea that God is literally operating like an active force, holding all of your very atoms together as you go through and operate in your free will, which is meticulously preserved through this entire cosmic love story. Here's my deep, heartfelt request of you, my fellow brother, father, friend, sister, mother, fellow human being. You may see this at some point in your life. You'd pause to consider that there's more to the story of a loving God in pursuit of relationship with his, her, and its kids. And that whatever misrepresentation you received is not the full picture.
Yeah.
There's more.
There's more.
And to miss out on it is to miss out on everything.
Yeah.
There's the greatest gift on the other side of faith, just even on the other side of committing to the faith journey. And that is the reality of unknowably deep intimacy. And so I just want to share from my heart to yours. Thank you, Dad, for putting fatherhood on display today and all the time, every day. And to all the fathers that he had to call to show up to be the hands and feet of the Father to a broken series of generations, thank you. And to those that are looking for the courage to, despite anything you've done, to know you are never disqualified from being able to be a conduit of divine love to this world. Never. And that the call to action will exist in perpetuity for as long as you're here. You get to be a part of the warriors of love, which is what we are. We're warriors for love, of love, plundering hell and populating heaven. And if you want to get some people going with you on that journey, then can people reach out to you, Dad?
Yeah, of course.
Someone find themselves
my phone
moved.
number, I give it.
Yeah, what do you think? I mean,
541-619-3148. Text anytime.
So you literally just got the cell phone for my father, and if you if you don't
DM.
text him, you're missing out.
You can DM or whatever that's called.
Yeah, and if he doesn't answer, call me and I'll get him to answer. 541-250-1065. We love you guys. We love all of you. Thank you for joining us for a conversation about fatherlessness and two guys' perspectives on a solution. Love you guys. Any parting words, Dad?
Good job.
All right. Thanks. All right. That's a wrap.
No, really. Very. It's kind of reminds me of when we do like music stuff and you practice, and then when you actually do it, it's like